Good day, I am Thomas Maydon, Principa's Practice Area Head for Data Science Solutions. Thanks for joining us for another Principa webinar where we explore a number of topics in data science and credit. Today I'm joined by Dave Eagle. He's CEO of Atura. Atura is an AI company that offers intelligent automation through chatbot technology, specifically in financial services. Atura has partnered with Principa to offer chatbot technology and credit, whether it be acquisitions, originations, customer service, or collections. Whilst chatbots seem to be everywhere, today we'll be looking specifically at chatbots in credit. We'll be concerned about where they can be used and how they can be used. Dave, here's a little bit about Dave. He's spent a decade in the tech industry, initially as COO for a custom software development business called NML. It was here that Atura was founded in about 2016 and then spun out in early 2020 when Dave took over as CEO. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks, Tom. Nice to be here.
Yeah, so we'll hopefully be about 20 minutes, half an hour, and we'll see where we go with the conversation. But I just want to start right at the beginning around the applications of chatbots in credit. So we're talking acquisitions, customer management, and collection. So chatbots have quite a wide application within the credit in credit scenarios, right?
Absolutely. So, I mean, we see applications across the full life cycle of a credit client. A lot of our initial interactions with clients of ours come through a customer service or client service team. So we typically start in that customer service and collection space, but then we definitely do see applications in the acquisitions and origination space as well. So really the full life cycle.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's interesting to see how the interest has picked up amongst a lot of our clients, across the wide range of different scenarios. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. Let's just talk a little bit about how chatbot engagements start on all of these things. So, I mean, you've got the situation where you're pushing for discussion for a chatbot discussion to start, or you've got the situation where the customer is actually jumping and trying to start a chatbot discussion. So, how does a chatbot discussion typically start within the financial services situations?
So there are many different ways to start a chat conversation, and it really all depends on each use case that you're looking at and the channels that you're trying to tackle. There are a lot of interactions which are, I guess, driven by outbound communication. So if you're looking at acquisitions or new business, you might want to send out messaging via SMS or email or something where you contacting a potential client directly. When it comes to something like a customer service type interaction, you often have clients who want to contact the business directly, and that'll be a customer-initiated conversation. So there definitely are lots of different ways to start a conversation. You can use things like SMS links, you can use QR codes, and it can sit on a public-facing website as well. So there are many different kind of ways that you can start this conversation.
Okay, so I mean, if we just break it down, so let's look at originations first of all, acquisitions first of all. I walk into a bank or a retailer. I'm interested in a certain credit product. Potentially there could be QR codes all over that store or that bank, and simply I take my smartphone, I press a button, and then up pops the chatbot, and I'm able to start the application process. So that would be a situation within acquisitions. Similarly, I could go to the website and instead of filling out a form, I can start a chat conversation. So you would see a chatbot embedded within the website. Am I right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And then on customer services, it might be the same thing. But if I'm outwardly hunting for new business, I might send out for hot leads SMSs, and then I would embed a code there, a link there basically. And once the customer clicks on that link, then up pops the chat.
Absolutely. I mean, there are a number of different business scenarios. I mean, we have had clients who have had a system-generated SMS, which based on a person-to-person interaction in a store or in a branch, then that might trigger this outbound link, or it might be part of a broader acquisition campaign where you're performing the analytics, identifying these users that you're trying to target, and then doing a more kind of a generalized distribution of these links. Okay.
All right, we'll maybe explore some of them in the conversation that follows. So I just want to move on to a little bit something else. It's something that comes up quite regularly when we speak to our clients. I mean, chatbots are everywhere. Whenever we speak to our clients, they don't have a chatbot. They're talking about they've got many chatbots. A lot of them are using the frameworks available and developing their own chatbots as well. But one thing that's come to us is very relevant for us, and we also talk to our clients in a lot of detail, is that a chatbot is nothing without the IP that goes in it. So you can have any chatbot, but unless you've got the IP that understands what the conversation's like within a collections environment, all the conversations you might have and where those conversations might go, you actually really need that IP. And yes, the chatbot's the vehicle to deliver that IP, but nevertheless, you need that IP. I mean, that's something I suppose is true generally in financial services. Am I right?
Absolutely. I mean, we find that definitely is the case, and for us, the IP is this industry knowledge. So we understand the types of engagements that you would have in a lending scenario, but it's also around how to build and maintain these chatbots over time, and even things like how do you handle things like small talk and when people are looking for help, the ability to hand over to a live agent, all those sorts of things that come in the full product are things that people, if they're willing to build these sorts of things themselves, which there are a lot of tools for companies to do that these days, but it does take a lot of time, and there are a lot of lessons that are learned over that time. For us, also, just as important is it's kind of as along with our sort of product IP, what's really important is the integration points that you have. So that's why we partnered with Principa, because a bot, if it's not fully integrated into a line of business system, it's very limited in what it can do. And so an example with Principa and the Collect Smart product, we're able to fully integrate a chat conversation and actually execute on a transaction that one of these customers is actually trying to do.
Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we'll talk a little bit about the different scenarios and what it all involves. And it's been great for us as Principa to actually bring our tech in and marry it with the Atura chatbot technology, and actually and then add in, of course, the IP that's required to. And it's a mixture of just general chatbot IP as well as obviously credit IP, which comes together. So I think pretty much on all chatbot platforms, you're going to have the issue of going to agents and when you need extra help and all that sort of thing. So that's nothing specific to credit, but it's something that obviously you understand very well. Yeah. So, but people say to us, well, you know, what's the difference between chatbot and filling out a form? So if I go to a website, I've got 40 fields to fill in. I fill out those 40 fields. What's the difference between the user experience between engaging with a chatbot through chat as opposed to filling out a form?
So the user experience is quite different. What we've seen is a lot more engagement in a chat medium versus a lot of form-based things that we've seen. There's definitely very significant cognitive load of a form, which can be very daunting. There's also, often in forms, there is a lot of fields that are listed there which aren't specific to the type of interaction that somebody's trying to complete. They're just catering for all scenarios. In a dynamic chat, we're able to only request the specific bits of information that are needed for that specific type of transaction. And it's really broken up into much smaller bite-sized chunks, which are a lot easier and less daunting for users to complete. And there is also there's this element of completion that happens throughout a chat process, which means that users are invested in the process being completed at the end, where you might find with people that take one look at the form and not even begin the journey, and you lose them right at the beginning of a process. Whereas once somebody's responded once, twice, three times, then they're more invested in the kind of the sunk effort that's gone on before, and they're more likely to finish the process to the end.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously how you put together the conversation, but it can be a very familiar and very comfortable conversation, whereas a form is typically not. So it's very, very grey and very kind of boring process. So, but obviously going through a sort of colourful discussion with a bot, it can obviously be a lot more sticky, and that's what we've been able to see as well. Just talking about what we've been able to see, we've recently deployed with you a chatbot at a major retailer. It's actually deployed within the collections environment. So we're talking about here capturing promises to pay, doing lookups into statements, also doing pulling balances for the customers as well. How have the customers generally found that engagement potentially compared to, say, talking to an agent directly?
So the data that we've seen from since we've launched in October is really positive. Part of the bot process is the ability for users to leave a score or how they would rate the interaction, and we've been pleasantly surprised by the responses that we've got. It's been across the board been really positive and higher than we'd actually initially anticipated. So that's a great positive that we're drawing from it.
I think one of the things I read some of those results. It's not in my area, but I did have a look at those results. So one of the response that the customers had was saying, we actually want to engage even more with these bots. We actually want more options, and not just the options that you've given us. So it's interesting to see that almost this channel in the collections environment is maybe less threatening. You're not dealing with another human being who speaks a different language. This can be a very comfortable environment, and I know for collections organisations that I've spoken to in, say, Australia, that self-service collections is a really big deal over there. So we should be seeing more of that over here as well. So it is interesting to see the customers feel that it's a less threatening environment, a more comfortable engagement, and that they actually even want more than what they're offered at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, one of the big benefits of a chatbot solution as opposed to a human solution is it really transfers control of the conversation to the customer. So in a usual collections engagement, there's this very kind of unequal power situation where the user is under a lot of stress, and they're really trying to, in many cases, get as much of the kind of a settlement as they can, and as you say, it's quite a threatening experience sometimes. And if you then give the control of that conversation to the customer themselves, they can I guess play around with the software. They can test the boundaries without getting any sort of unhappy response, and they really do feel like they're in control of the conversation. And the data that we've seen from studies is that if you give a customer the power to control that conversation, they're much more likely to stick to any P2P or anything that they promise over the course of that conversation.
No, it's interesting. It is an interesting balance, because I think having conducted collection training courses over the many years, one of the things we talk about is not asking the customer what do they want, but actually telling the customer, creating bounds for the customer to say, choose something within these sets of options. So it is interesting, this chatbot platform is quite different. One of the things also that we're looking at in collections is bringing in a lot more tech analytics, so potentially early settlements, perhaps optimal installment amounts, negotiated installments or arrangements. All of those things mean that you've got a level of complexity that you can bring, but obviously you can put together those utterances within the chatbot to negotiate around those things. So certain situations you want customers to look at settling their account. Certain situations you understand the customer may be strained a little bit, and you may need to look at negotiated installments. So I think those are the areas that we're going to see added on to the collection offering within the chatbot environment. And I think those, it'll be interesting to see how those go down. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where the real intelligence in the solution really comes to the fore. So it's not just a dialogue solution. It's really bringing in the analytics, as you mentioned, and offering things that they wouldn't otherwise be offered in that specific scenario that's unique to that customer at that time.
Okay, a bit of a change of direction, but something that we hear very regularly, and I know you've heard it quite a few times as well. What about WhatsApp as a channel? So when we're talking generally about the chatbot, basically we're saying it's a chat pops up on your smartphone. This isn't WhatsApp popping up necessarily. It's not Facebook Messenger popping up. It's actually the application itself popping up directly. But a lot of our clients are sort of say, well, our customers are all using WhatsApp daily. Surely we should be using WhatsApp. What's your response to that?
So a lot of the work that we do is as you described there. It's a browser-based application, and on a smartphone, it's designed for mobile, and so it looks like any mobile app that you would be used to. But typically, what we see is when people start talking about how do we build a bot solution, they want it across multiple channels, which is a good strategy to have, because part of the point of creating a bot solution is you giving your customers an option to interact with your business in the way that they want to, as opposed to forcing a channel on it. WhatsApp as a channel is more complicated. So the web channel is more flexible and versatile, and you have a lot less limitations on it. WhatsApp, it definitely is ubiquitous in South Africa, and obviously it can have a huge impact on the reach that your bot has. There's some really good advantages, like it's what we call a sticky channel. So once you've created a contact for whatever business you're dealing with, you have that contact on your phone, and so you don't have to go and then look up. You don't need a URL every time you want to chat to the bot. You just go to WhatsApp, find the contact, and you start chatting straight away. So that is a big advantage. It often does depend on the type of interaction that you're wanting to execute by this chat medium. So if it's a type of interaction like a client service interaction, which is going to be regular and reoccurring over time, then WhatsApp is a great channel, because you do have a history of your chats. You have the ability to contact it quickly without doing this whole lookup process that I mentioned. So there really are some significant benefits to using the channel. On the downside, it's more complicated and it's more limited in terms of the interface. There are limits. It's really just text and image based, so you don't have a lot of visual controls that you might have in a web-based bot. So a lot of WhatsApp bots you would have seen, they have this kind of USSD style interaction. So they'll send a message and then they'll say, press 1 for this option, press 2 for this option, which from a user experience perspective is not ideal. Where on a web-based chatbot, you might have these quick response buttons that you can push, which is a lot more fluid and a lot more, I guess, modern in its execution. Also, Facebook themselves, they limit what can be done on the WhatsApp channel. So there's some marketing and sales activities they don't allow on the platform at all. If you want to send outbound messaging through WhatsApp, you have to go and get templates approved by Facebook, and they really are trying to control the types of interactions that happen on the channel to prevent spam, which would happen if that wasn't in place. And then there are some technical considerations. You do have to work through these third-party providers who have access to that WhatsApp for Business API, and there's some cost considerations as well, which aren't a feature of our web bots. Typically, what we see is when we talk through our clients, we're through all the options of what are the benefits and drawbacks of each channel. We typically see people say, okay, well, as a first pass, let's do a web bot because it gets us almost everything that we need without any of the complications. And we'll look at WhatsApp as a phase 2, phase 3. And that's typically the approach that most of our clients take.
So, yeah, I mean, just if we just look at the credit scenario we've got in the acquisition space, it might be tricky to do a WhatsApp environment. You don't have a relationship with the customer. So that's going to be a little bit trickier. In the customer service, if the customer's engaging you for customer services quite regularly, you know, having a WhatsApp for Business account and then having the customer interact with you whenever might be quite a useful channel. And similarly, if the customer's then into collections, you've also got that. But again, if it's a brand new customer entering into collections to start, that initial conversation may be tricky. So I think the important thing here is that there's quite a lot of to consider before jumping into WhatsApp as your primary channel. Okay, great. Just on another point that you know, there are chatbots and there are chatbots. So one of the things that you talk about is that your chatbots are have the ability to utilize machine learning to learn intents and things like that. So we're talking here, am I right in saying a customer asks for something the chatbot doesn't understand, chatbot asks, somebody else asks for the same thing the chatbot doesn't understand, you get 4 or 5 of these lined up, and then you look at this and you say, well, actually these things mean this, and then the chatbot learns that, okay, I now know what to do with that intent when it comes through from the customer.
Yeah. So our bots use natural language processing as a way to identify what a customer's intent is, so what they're ultimately trying to achieve. And we use supervised learning to train our language models to be able to interpret free text as it's entered. It is exactly as you describe. If there are things that are not understood by the language model, we do train it over time so that it is more accurate. But we also do, we have a bit of a hybrid model where we offer up some options so that people understand what functionality is available to them, as well as giving them the option to just type free text. So we have this hybrid approach, which we feel gets the best of both worlds.
Okay. And yeah, so you know, you're thinking about the person sitting there and sort of with all these chats and these questions and all that sort of thing. I mean, are we talking about young millennials or Generation Z or whatever they're called, or are we talking about older people? I mean, what are we talking about in terms of demographics of people actually utilizing the chat platform?
So the one interesting piece of data that we've got is, in our initial assumptions, was that it would be younger people who would be using this way more regularly, and the older boomer generation wouldn't use it at all. What we have seen is there's been a lot more kind of even spread across the age demographics than we were expecting. It definitely is slanted towards the younger users who are more used to digital channels and actually executing things via their phone, but it's not as it doesn't tail off nearly as much as we were expecting with older people, which is quite reassuring, and it's simple enough for people who are not particularly technically literate to be able to use themselves.
So you're not, you know, as a say a credit provider looking to introduce chat into one of your channels as a channel into one of your decision areas, you're not going to be just dealing with one segment of the population. You're generally going to be hitting quite a few different segments of the population.
Absolutely. And what we do, I mean, the one limitation, but it's also a benefit of chat, is you have to be very concise about your language and very clear in what can and can't be done at any point in a conversation. And that's typically a function of the real estate that you're dealing with. And so what that means is you're not overcomplicating things, you're not being kind of overly verbose, and so it does have an appeal to a very broad spectrum of users.
So yeah, I mean, that's important. I think accessibility is important. Not everybody, if you've got the chatbot working in English, not everybody has English as a first language. Very few people do, in fact. So keeping your language quite concise and clearly understood is very important. But in our environment as well, we've got a lot of providers who are saying, listen, I actually do need to offer chat within different languages. How do you deal with that?
So it is quite difficult from a South African language perspective to deal with multi-language. The language processing engine we use is called Lewis. It's a Microsoft product, and that supports I guess the big international languages. So in the South African context, that really only covers English. So from a natural language processing perspective, it's very difficult to support local languages. There are ways that you are able to handle that, and that's in a much more kind of structured decision tree based chatbot interaction, where you could simply translate English into other different languages, but then you are losing the natural language processing capabilities of the bot. So for a relatively simple bot, it would be something that would be possible you'd be able to choose your language up front, and that would determine how the bot is translated beyond that. But it would need to be a relatively simple implementation of a bot. Okay.
All right. I just want to touch on something else now. It's quite a controversial point, actually. With these bots out there, I mean, are we seeing, it's controversial, particularly in the South African context, are we taking away jobs from South African call centers, or do you think that we are somehow augmenting what we already have? I mean, what's your view on this, and have you seen any stats on anything that would indicate one way or another?
Yeah, so I believe it's definitely an augmentation thing. What we've seen actually across all our clients is the number of call center interactions that have happened post a bot launching has actually increased. So we actually haven't seen call centers whose volume and workload has decreased as a result of a bot implementation. I mean, I think the real cause of this is call centers are actually under so much pressure at the moment, and they're being absolutely inundated, and what we're doing allows them to really survive, as opposed to taking over workload from the existing call center. So we do see that these call centers are able to stay more or less the same size. So we're not seeing any reduction in the call centers that we work with, but their workload is increasing from the pre-bot era, as well as the number of interactions that we're handling via the bot. So there's just a lot more interactions across the board.
Okay, I thought we should just take a moment just to sort of review quickly the different areas, the decision areas. So we've got acquisitions, originations, we've got customer services and collections. I think we touched a little bit on collections, but as far as I see it, I think the deployment of bots within those areas could be very, very different. So let's just chat a little bit about acquisitions, originations. We're looking at a couple of things. Firstly, customer pre-qualifying for a facility or product or something like that. So you can go on and the customer could capture information, just a few fields, and then click submit, and we can do a quick bureau check to see whether the customer is pre-qualified for application, and then push them through a long form thereafter. So that's really what we're saying. So on the origination side, we're talking a pretty linear process, but as I understand from deploying these bots, you have the sort of looping back tendency. You're gonna you pass most people down this linear process, but every now and again you get a side conversation that happens, and then you try and loop them back into the linear process. But generally, we should find the customer experience for most customers, different types of customers, will be fairly similar as they go through the process. It should be a lot simpler, perhaps, than some of the other areas.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the beauties of a chat-based mechanism is the customer can decide how quickly or slowly they want to go through a process. So in that example, you might come to a consent stage and you say, do you consent to us doing a bureau check? And for most people, they might be happy with that. They might pass straight through this linear process, but there is a portion of those users who will say, well, what does this mean for me? What information are you going to be looking at? Where is it stored? How are you going to use the data, and all these sorts of things? And in a chat conversation, you offer them the ability to say, well, hang on a second, what about this? What about that? And you have this side conversation that you mentioned, and you reassure people that there's nothing sinister in the process. And once they're reassured, you bring them back in, and you just join the rest of the flow, like the others who went straight through that linear process.
So, I mean, another clear example in that is existing customers versus new customers. So, you know, an existing customer goes on board, they put their ID number in, etc. They verify themselves. You normally have a verification step. Once that is done, they then continue with an application process, but that would be very different to a brand new customer. So the existing customer, you may just be checking up whether the information you have is correct, whereas a brand new customer, you're talking about capturing a lot of additional information. So that's it. Or if it's, you know, for certain bigger products, you might have joint application versus a single application. The joint application might have a side conversation which captures the secondary applicant and then joins the main process thereafter. So yeah, I think we're generally talking about a linear process, but you will have the odd example where the process might be shortened, or there might be some side conversations. So that's what we're talking about from the originations perspective. Now on the collections and the customer services side, we're talking about very much almost the customer from day, in originations, the customer wants to capture the application information. Everyone pretty much wants to do that from day one to see if they qualify for whatever they want to apply for. Whereas in collections, it could be, oh, please send me my statement. Oh, I want to do this, or I've got a dispute, or I want to make a promise to pay, or I want to make an arrangement, or I want to, from point one, the first point, you may have 7 or 8 different, intentions for the customer, which might mean 8 very different conversations that you might have with the customer. Similarly, on the customer services side, it might be something similar. So would we say, am I right in saying that, building a bot for originations would be very different to building a bot, say, for account management or collections?
Absolutely. I mean, what we do find is it's very useful to have a very specific purpose for each bot. Once you try and get too broad, it starts to become a very complex thing. And so you even for a single client, you might have 2 very different bots that one addresses acquisitions and one is more of a client service and collections bot. Because as you say, it's the intention is quite different, and how you would go about it might differ as well.
Yeah, and so that leads me to my last question. What do you think is the future for chatbots and credit? Do you have a view on where things are going, and do you think the uptake's going to increase as have we seen it been doing over the last few years, or is it just yet another digital channel that is just going to just peter along? What's the future of chatbots in credit?
So I think the future is bright in credit for chatbots. I think there's a huge amount of opportunity. I think the adoption that we're already seeing is just the tip of the iceberg. And as people get more and more familiar with these self-service chat-based platforms, it's only going to keep growing. I think there's a lot of people who are moving away from person-to-person interactions. They are really wanting to help themselves do their own research without having the pressure of another person involved in that process. And so I think across the life cycle in credit, we're going to see a big uptake.
Yeah, so I mean, the other area that's quite interesting for us, Principa has new owners, and one of our sister companies is very involved in robotic process automation. So, I mean, we could see the marrying of RPA into chatbots. Let me give you an example. So, I'm a customer, and I engage with the chatbot, and I say to the chatbot, "Listen, I'd like to close my account, please." The chatbot understands that and then kicks off a robotic process which will go in and do all the requisite steps within the closure of account without having to force it to a customer service agent who would do exactly the same thing. So it'll be interesting to see how RPA comes into play and sort of works together with the chatbots to actually bring in full automation within a host of different customer service requirements or even collection requirements.
Yeah, so we definitely are seeing quite a bit of that, where you have these bot-to-bot interactions which happen, as well as the bot-to-human interactions, and definitely I think this combination of RPA and user-facing chatbots, I think, is very exciting.
Okay, so I think that draws us to the end. Thank you so much, Dave, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's great. It's great to be partners with Atura, and it's great to talk to our clients around how we can bring chatbots to augment their processes within their organizations. And I think I'm glad to hear you think the future's bright, because we do too. I think there's a lot of applications still to be seen, and I think a lot of organizations could benefit greatly by adopting chatbot technology and self-service technology within their organization. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to the audience for joining us. And yes, if you want to know a little bit more around chatbots, offerings, etc., feel free to get in touch with Principa. We can bring Dave into the picture as well if required, but it's info@principa.co.za. Or you can visit our website, www.principa.co.za, to see a little bit more. Until next time, it's goodbye from me. Cheers, Dave.
Bye, Ryan. Cheers.
Bye.